Hello and welcome to the Not Too Stuffy Law Show. I'm your host, Attorney Justin St. James. For the next half hour, we hope to entertain, inform, and enlighten you. And if we don't, you should probably be watching Dr. Phil. I'd like to welcome my studio audience. On this program, we'll take a trip to Nevins Farm, where we talk to the people who talk to the animals. I'll then interview a real live attorney, Professor Holly Vietzke of the Massachusetts School of Law. Professor Vietzke will give us a brief overview on animal law and what it's all about. Then we'll come back to the studio and have a lesson in torts, courtesy of the National Football League. We'll study the case of Hackbart versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Then we'll finish up and roll credits underneath the beautiful music of Sara Melson. But first up, Nevins Farm. Nevins Farm is located in Methuen, Massachusetts. It sits on over 40 acres near the junctions of Routes 28 and 213. Nevins Farm is a part of the Massachusetts Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals and incorporates not only an animal care and adoption facility for small animals, but also an equine center for horses and other farm animals, human education programs, canine training, and burial services for animals. To find out more about Nevins Farm and the adoption process, I spoke with one of its resident experts, Marley Downing-Beener, as she gave me a tour of the facilities.
This is the area. This is where we do our adoptions.
Okay.
We have 4 adoption stations. Counseling for an adoption generally the paperwork takes about 40 minutes, maybe an hour. It's a great opportunity for families to ask questions. It's a good chance for the adoption counselors to really get to know the family before we send the animal home. And we try to keep it nice and quiet and real personal. So this is where it all happens, but prior to an adoption, prior to all the paperwork, we really encourage the families to spend a lot of time with the animals. Dogs, preferably outside, again, away from the shelter. And then with the cats, we have some get acquainted rooms, which I will show you in a minute.
Alrighty.
So let's venture on into the adoption room.
What types of animals do you take? Are you on dogs, cats, rabbits, horses?
You name it. Keep going. Whatever.
I saw sheep on the way in.
Sheep, we've got a bull, horses, we've got a bearded lizard right now, many different types of birds, you name it, rats, rabbits, guinea pigs, of course, cats, kittens, puppies, just about anything, just about anything.
There you go.
And here is
Hi, guys.
our colony room. This is luxury for the cats. There's areas where they can scratch and climb. We have a cat door, so the cats can actually go outside, sunbathe, and just get away. We're a nonprofit organization. A lot of people think because we're the Massachusetts Society for the Prevention Against Cruelty to Animals that we're state funded, but that's not the case. We're actually a nonprofit, and all of our funding comes from donations. So this is our get acquainted rooms.
Okay.
These are our get acquainted rooms where a family can come in and get to know a cat away from the chaos that's out there. Unfortunately, it's really difficult to see how an animal is going to react in a home environment. This is far from a home environment, but you generally can see if they're playful, how quick they warm up to you. It's just, again, it's a nice quiet room. And before and after the shelter opens, we use these rooms as rooms where the kittens can come in here and play and exercise and jump up on the windowsills.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this is a female?
Yeah, this is Faye. We're guessing about 8 to 9 years old. She's been here since March.
Wow. There she goes.
One of the first things we would like to discuss with the family is that the long-term commitment. The animal, are you prepared, for example, for a cat, if you're adopting a kitten, that this animal will be part of your family, maybe possibly for the next 15 to 20 years. Are you okay with that? Do you have a stable environment for that cat? Do you have the finances? Are you financially able to provide that animal with vaccinations, medical care, should the animal become ill or injured? And just whether or not, a lot of the families that come to us have already had these animals before, which is nice, but it's always so exciting when a new family comes in to adopt a cat for the first time, and we sort of go through the whole thing about scooping the litter box, how often that needs to be done. And most importantly, I would think when we do our adoptions is that we need to tell the families that we're here as a resource. This might not go as smoothly as you hope for, but call us. You know, we're not saying goodbye, good luck. We're saying call us with any questions. Let us know how that animal's doing, or if you have any problems or concerns, because from this point on, we're going to help you as best as we can forever while you have that cat. So basically during our adoption counseling, we're just, again, trying to stress the long-term commitment and whether or not they're prepared for that. Okay. And most people are. And if we feel as though the family needs to think about it, there are some families that come in here and spontaneously just want to adopt a kitten because they're cute. I can't blame them, I would too. But we might take that adoption a little bit slower and say, why don't you go home and think about it for a night, do some research on the computer, and then, you know, call us in a day or two.
Sure.
And we'd be happy to do that too, because it is a big commitment. I'll bring you into our avian exotic room, where we keep the birds and now turtles.
Turtles, all right.
I told you we have a little bit of everything. Parakeets bond with each other. If you notice that oftentimes they'll groom each other, they feed each other. It's really quite precious. And this turtle's 14 years old.
Wow. And he's trying to get out.
He's trying to do something. These other 4 turtles over there seem to be wanting some attention too. Yeah, we're no longer just an adoption facility for dogs and cats. We're pretty much a rescue group for any type of animal. If the dogs get along well with each other, then we'll put them in play groups together. Again, most importantly, we need to, while the animals are in our care, enrich their environment. Cheesecake. Diesel. So that's it for the adoption. Go ahead. For the adoption rooms. But as you can see, we do have, with the amount of animals that we're adopting out each year, we like to also help the adopters when they come here to go home with the materials that they need. So we've got a whole retail section with cat beds, we sell food, things for the small animals such as hay, toys. Oh yeah, plenty of toys. So yeah, it's a one stop.
Busy with, yeah.
That's all right.
We're heading back over.
Yeah, let's go back into holding. So this is our medical suite. We have a vet team that does whatever we need them to do. Lots of spays and neuters before the animals are adopted out. Oftentimes we have animals that come in that need medical treatment when they arrive. And so we are so fortunate to have a vet team that can evaluate those animals, assess them, get them on the medications that they need right away. There's a surgery taking place right now.
Every adoption is very unique, very different depending on what the family's needs are, and we're able to work around all of those differences because all the dogs are different, all the cats are different, and all the families are different. So a lot of people will come in and have a special situation. Maybe they want to think about it for a couple days, or they need to consult with another family member. Be happy. Our main goal is that we're creating the right match for that animal, so it will be a permanent adoption, and we'll do whatever it takes to make that happen. And we have some families coming in for several months before they find the right pet, and that's okay. We let people, don't get discouraged. The right animal will be here for you. Just take your time, because we get so many wonderful animals, and we just want to make sure that for the animal's sake and for the family's sake that it's going to be a permanent situation.
Once again, Nevins Farm depends on donations for its survival, everything from blankets to cleaning material to gift certificates for local stores. And of course, monetary donations work just as well. Nevins Farm in Methuen, Massachusetts. If you want to donate or volunteer your time, please call them at 978-687-7453 or find them on the web at www.mspca.org/Nevins. Of course, a discussion about animals would not be complete without including an overview on animal law. I was very fortunate to have Attorney Holly Vietzke, a full-time professor at the Massachusetts School of Law, graciously accept my invitation to meet me at Nevins Farm. Professor Vietzke is also an author of several articles on animal rights and an editor of several books. And personally, I can say she's one heck of a lady. Here's Professor Vietzke. What's typically the first question you get when people ask you?
Usually people want to say animal law. What's that?
And what is animal law?
Really, it's not a specific type of law. It encompasses all other areas of the law. So it's contract law, it's constitutional law, wills and trusts, family law, tort law, as it applies to animals.
So really, it kind of borrows from other aspects of the law that's already established. Is that right?
That's right.
So then how did animal law really evolve? Just based on other types of law already on the books?
Well, as you might know, animals have always been a part of human culture, and livestock laws are among the strongest that we have right now. So animal law was always there. It just changed its focus as people started to put more emphasis on their pets and their companion animals rather than their livestock being their livelihood.
Okay. And so how would one define, say, for example, what is cruelty? Animal cruelty or cruelty in animals, how would one define that? Would it just be merely deprivation of food and water? Would it be physical abuse? I mean, it could really be, there's a lot of gray area there.
The legislature actually defines it as all of that, unnecessarily torturing an animal, abusing an animal, depriving it of necessary water and food. Some would go so far as to say refusal to seek medical care.
And you mentioned about the constitutional aspects of it. So who would actually have standing? Would I, if I saw something, would I call up my neighbor and say, gee, I noticed your pet's out at all hours of the night and he doesn't look all that well fed? I mean, would that be the first thing to do, is just to kind of let your neighbor know that this cat it belongs to you, you might want to take better care of it? Or would I just automatically pick up the phone and call the cops? Or what would I do?
Well, if you have a good relationship with your neighbor, you could certainly encourage your neighbor to take care of it. They would probably appreciate that more than if you called the police. But that would probably be your best bet, is to call the MSPCA, or the local police officer, animal control officer, to come out and investigate. Because what you might deem cruel might not actually be cruel under the legislature.
Sure. There was a story in the news a couple of weeks back about a mail carrier who discovered an 8-week-old kitten in a mailbox. So someone had abandoned her by dropping her in the mailbox, and I suppose their intent was a mailman's going to come along and discover her at some point, but that's not really the greatest thing in the world to do. No. So typically we want people to know that if you should come to a place like maybe Nevins Farm or other shelters, because that could really do a lot of harm to the cat. As it turns out, the kitten was fine. She was physically fine. She was, of course, naturally she was shaken up a little bit. Cruelty to animals could be really a lot of different things, but we want to not really define it because it could encompass just about anything. Is there a lemon law for animals?
There is, actually, for dogs and cats anyway, and the UCC covers pets as a good. So I suppose if you had any kind of animal and there was a breach of warranty, you could return it.
They have 14 days, is that right?
Under the UCC, I think it's longer.
Usually longer, but under the animal law for dogs and cats specifically, I think it's 14
Right.
days. Is that right? So they should have checked out by a vet, and if anything's wrong, just bring it back to wherever it is they I was going to say rented it. Thank you. Acquired it, not rented it. Acquired it. If people have questions about animal law, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, you can contact me at the school.
Okay.
I teach at Massachusetts School of Law.
Okay, and the number?
978-681-0800.
Okay, and you have a website? Or?
I do. Well, you can email me at holly@mslaw.edu.
holly@mslaw.edu. All right, excellent. Questions about animal law? This is your lady right here, Professor Holly Vietzke. Thank you for coming. Thanks for your time.
Sure. Thanks.
Just a brief follow-up on something Professor Vietzke touched on. She mentioned something called the UCC. What the professor was referring to was the Uniform Commercial Code. The Uniform Commercial Code, or UCC, is the law that governs commercial transactions, such as the sale of goods. It also covers secured transactions or security agreements and negotiable instruments, such as a promissory note, CD, or bank check. But under Article 2, Section 2-105 of the UCC, animals, such as dogs or cats, are considered a, quote, good, close quote, when they are purchased from either a merchant or someone who is in the business of selling dogs or cats. When you adopt an animal, it's generally a good idea to have a signed agreement that states what your rights are should you want to return the pet. But if you have more questions about animal rights or animal law, contact Professor Vietzke. Our contact information, again, 978-681-0800. Or you may email the professor at holly@mslaw.edu. As for the UCC, if you ever find yourself having trouble sleeping at night, instead of going to your doctor or buying expensive prescriptions, simply pick up a copy of the Uniform Commercial Code and start to read it. I guarantee that in a matter of seconds, you'll quickly fall into a deep sleep. Up next, a lesson in torts, courtesy of the Hackbart versus the Cincinnati Bengals.
Tort. A tort is A, a pastry that you eat with a beverage such as coffee. B, a woman who walks the streets looking for a good time. Or C, a civil wrong such as a breach of duty for which a remedy may be obtained, usually in the form of damages.
And the answer is B. No, the answer is C. A civil wrong, such as a breach of duty for which a remedy may be obtained, usually in the form of damages. I'm here with Ben Van Doren, who's going to help me explain the case of Hackbart versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Ben, thanks for being here. I appreciate your time. Do you like football?
I love football.
All right. Would it be safe to say that if you were to play football professionally, that at some point in your career you would expect to get hit?
Definitely, yeah.
All right. Well, that's a fair assumption. And in 1973, that was also an assumption. But that's how we get the case of Hackbart versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, actually, we don't have the Cincinnati Bengals and the Denver Broncos. What we really have is the Cleveland Browns and the New York Giants. So we're going to pretend that the Cleveland Browns are the Cincinnati Bengals, and we're going to pretend that the New York Giants are really the Denver Broncos. This was opening day in 1973 on September 16, 1973. It was at Mile High Stadium, the first game of the season, and we had Kenny Anderson at quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals. You probably don't remember who he is,
No.
but he was a very good quarterback. We had someone named Charles Booby Clark. Now, do you know why they called him Booby?
No.
I don't either, and actually
Okay.
I really don't care.
Yeah.
But that was his name, Charles Booby Clark, as a running back for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's important. He's an important guy to remember. And we also have here in safety, free safety position, is Dale Hackbart, who's going to be playing for the Denver Broncos. And we have another player called Billy Thompson, who's the left corner. Now, the way that the play unfolded was the Bengals were on the 45-yard line heading into the Denver end zone. The play was designed for that Booby Clark would come toward the sidelines and then sprint down the sidelines and head into the end zone, hopefully to catch a winning touchdown from Kenny Anderson.
Yeah.
So let's see if we can get Booby Clark over to the sidelines, hit the juice, see where he goes. There we go, good. And now he's supposed to head into the end zone. Whoop, hang on up there. There you go. And kill it. There we go, and well, actually, Hackbart ended up getting tackled by somebody else, but that's not supposed to happen. All right, so Hackbart instead knows that Kenny Anderson is going to throw the ball. The left corner, Billy Thompson, also knows that Anderson is going to be throwing the ball. So they both converge on Booby Clark. Here's what happens. Hackbart throws a block on Clark so that Clark can't catch the ball.
Yeah.
Now today you'd probably call that pass interference, but I guess in 1973 you could do that. So if you're Kenny Anderson, see if you can try to hit Booby Clark, but instead what'll probably happen is you're going to hit, whoop, got a strong arm there, you got right over the goalpost and everything. Well, it's all right, something like that. Billy Thompson, in fact, intercepts the ball. So he's got the ball, and he's going to head over he's going to head toward the Cincinnati end zone, so hit the juice. Let him see how far he goes. Well, something like that. We can kill it. Actually, Thompson makes it to about midfield. And he's tackled at that point. Now, both Booby Clark and Hackbart are on the ground because they both tackled each other. The whistle is blown dead. The play stops. Hackbart is still on the ground. Booby Clark gets up, and because he's frustrated and because he's angry, because Cincinnati is losing the game, in fact, they did lose that game 28-10, Booby Clark whacks Hackbart on the back of the head, and both men fall forward. No fouls are called, no flags are thrown. Both men go off to their respective sides. The Bronco offense now comes onto the field. The Bengals defense now comes onto the field. And play resumes. Again, the first half is about to end, and it does end. Hackbart then begins to feel numbness in his arm. He can't feel his arm or his shoulder. He gets it packed with ice, basically his helmet and his shoulder. He goes out and he plays the second half of the game. The next week against San Francisco 49ers, Broncos play the 49ers, Hackbart plays the entire game. The next game after that, they play the Chicago Bears. He plays the entire game, but over time, Hackbart's arm becomes more and more painful.
Yeah.
He goes to see a neurosurgeon, and the neurosurgeon says, well, you've shattered the C4, C5, C6, and C7 vertebrae. In essence, his neck was broken. He didn't know it. He's walking around for 3 weeks with a broken neck. He didn't even know it. Of course, that ended his career. Hackbart decides that he could sue the Cincinnati Bengals and Boobie Clark for a tort claim of assault and battery. But when he goes to district court in Denver, the judge says pretty much what we talked about at the beginning of the segment. He said, well, you know, football is an inherently violent game. People should expect to get hit. He compared it to coal mining. He said you take an assumption of risk when you do a hazardous game such as football. So he sided with the Cincinnati Bengals and he sided with Boobie Clark. Hackbart decides to appeal it. He takes it to the 10th District Court in Denver for an appeal. And the appeals court looks at it somewhat differently. They say, well, the assault and battery case, the assault and battery theory is an interesting one, but there are two problems with it. The first is the way they define assault and battery. Assault they define as an imminent desire to cause physical harm to another. They said that Clark did intend to hit Hackbart, but he did not intend to harm him. No. When they look at battery, they define battery as an unlawful touching. So they said, well, it could be battery, but the problem is the statute of limitations has already run out. Now, when I say statute of limitations, what do you think I mean by that?
Well, I think if a crime has been committed after a certain amount of time has passed, then he can no longer be charged with it.
Right, that's absolutely right. You've got so much time for a plaintiff to bring a suit against the defendant. So depending on what the case is, it could be 1 year, it could be 3 years, 6 years, whatever the case may be. Apparently in Colorado in 1973, you only had 1 year to bring an assault and battery case. But the appeals court said something interesting. They said, well, it may not be assault and battery, but Boobie Clark had a duty to act reasonably, in other words, to treat Hackbart with reasonable care. In other words, he had a reckless disregard for the care of Hackbart after the play was whistled dead. Now, for example, recklessness might be defined as a person who has no regard for the consequences of his actions. So, for example, if you had a big test coming up, and if you didn't pass the test, you weren't going to graduate, your parents might say, Ben, you're acting recklessly because you don't care about the consequences of the exam. They'll probably say a few more things, but we'll leave it at that. So the circuit court, the appeals court sent it back to the district court, and they said, please try it again. Now, what do you suppose happened at this point?
Well, I think it took a long time, probably.
Absolutely right. As do most court cases, it took a very long time. It took 6 years, actually. In 1979, the trial was about to begin again when both parties decided to try to negotiate some kind of settlement in Hackbart's favor. In July 5 of 1981, it was finally announced, 8 years after the incident, it was finally announced that a settlement was reached between the Cincinnati Bengals, Boobie Clark, and Hackbart. Hackbart getting an undisclosed amount of money for his injuries. Interestingly enough, even though Boobie Clark was frustrated that day, and even though the Bengals lost that day, they went on to win their division. They won. They had a record of 10-4, 10 wins and 4 losses. Again, they played 14 games in a season in 1973, and they won the Central Division. In 1973, you had 3 divisions. You had Eastern, Central, and Western Division. The Denver Broncos, interestingly enough, did not win the division in the West, but they had their first winning season ever in 14 years. So they had a pretty good season too. Dale Hackbart, of course, had to retire. He had already been retired when the Broncos hired him back to play for them one more season, and he living comfortably. And tragically, Boobie Clark is no longer with us. He died in 1988 at the age of 38, which probably seems like a long way away for you, and it should, but 38's a young age. He died fairly young, and I don't know the circumstances why he died. There was actually a park in Florida named after Boobie Clark. I don't know if they called it Clark's Park. They probably don't. But that's pretty much the story of Hackbart versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Any questions? Or?
No, I don't think so.
You've been terrific. I appreciate your help. Thank you for helping me explain this. Thanks for your time. My thanks once more to Ben Van Doren for his great help with that last segment. I'd also like to thank my studio audience for being here. Looks like she's been reading the Uniform Commercial Code. We leave you with a song from a beautiful singer with a beautiful voice and a beautiful soul. You may have heard of her. Her name is Sara Melson, capital M-E-L-S-O-N. You may find Sara on Facebook and iTunes and Amazon and iLike and MySpace and saramelson.com. Sara is just about everywhere, and she deserves to be. Her music has also been featured on the television programs Grey's Anatomy and Lipstick Jungle. Sara has 2 albums out and is working on more. The first one is called Dirty Mind, and the second, simply Sara Melson. We leave with music from her first album, one of my favorite Sara Melson songs, and it's called Happy Endings. Until next time, if there is a next time, I hope you have some happy endings yourself. Take care.
I guess I just never realized how badly I needed to be surprised. You kissed me with your eyes, it was then I knew. Now I'm 1,000 miles away, waiting for the first light of day. And the way I'm feeling is oh so new. And I believe in happy endings, and I only see the good in you. And I believe the world is worth mending. I think that you do too. I know that you're an optimist. You're pretty impossible to resist. And I know you've been used for all your wealth. It's okay, you can take my